Well, Ferdinand Dadroha, Arise chief correspondent, joins us live from Sokoto for an update. Ferdinand, good to see you. What more are we learning in terms of updates following the U.S. strike on Tambuwal there? I know yesterday you did mention that in Tangaza there were a number of casualties. What are you learning so far?
Well, yes, and yes, still the same information in terms of casualties. Well, we have not been able to put the numbers together, and that's because clearance operations taking place within Tangaza. Well, don't forget the target was the Balmi forest in Tangaza, and the military is still undergoing clearance operations there, and it's been very difficult. Aside some persons who live within neighboring communities, well, those areas of targets, like we pointed out yesterday, some of them routes between Nigeria and Niger that were targeted, and that's because they say it's a route, it's a place for assembling and staging of terrorist activities. Well, it's been very, very difficult for anybody to indeed get in there and then provide pictures or perhaps evidence. But you take a look at some of the things that that have happened since then, and you really want to say a whole lot more is desired in terms of these strikes and some of the after effects and then the aftershock. Well, earlier I did bring to you that report from Jabo, where an unexploded missile was found. Now I say use the word unexploded missile, and that's exactly what the security operatives, that's the theory they are working with, talking about some of the some things that were found. Call them debris if you like. Well, call them unexploded missiles. Well, they are investigating at the state in which one of them was found. According to a security personnel that did speak off record, well, he said, it was still vibrating, and so you can't take chances. Until earlier, we were there when some experts did come in, and after a while, well, they did leave. Some other sets came in before we left, and quite funny how it was discovered. It was a farmer who went to his farm, but don't forget, another had been found after the detonation, still in the same jabal. After the explosion, still in the same jabal. And then the next day, hours later, a farmer went to his farm, and just when he was about wrapping up, that's exactly when he found something on the ground. Well, he started hitting it with his axe, tried to dig it out. Unfortunately, he couldn't come out because he was really stuck on the ground. And then he called some more people. They came in, tried to dig it out. It was difficult. They got a camel, tried to drag it out. It was difficult. And in the process, that was when some other villagers came in, saw it, and of course, raised the alarm. And then security operatives came in, cordoned the area. And so there's a whole lot that needs to be done in terms of precision. There's a whole lot that needs to be done in terms of military intelligence, and then there's a whole lot that needs to be done in terms of trying to educate people on what to do in this kind of scenario. And that's because, from what we hear, these attacks are not going to stop anytime soon, except we all of a sudden see these terrorists that pack their loads and bags and go away, like we hear that they are already running away. You talked about Tangaza, and from what we hear, it's a base, it's an enclave for the Lakurawa terrorists, and we hear that they're getting very, very uncomfortable. Well, we also hear that the operations are about to be expanded to the northeast, which was what Senator Aline Dume was indeed asking for earlier on. So there's a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot in Sokoto State. They're still trying to get a grip of what happened, get a grip of the casualties in Tangaza. But thank God we can confirm that there was no casualties elsewhere, and from what the security operatives did put out, 16 missiles were thrown, and then debris, expended debris, they describe it as expended debris, dropped in some areas, where some of them causing some smaller explosions, you want to say.
Right. Ferdinand, before I let you go, is there any indication at all that these strikes by the U.S. and, of course, the Nigerian forces has made the terrorists camper elsewhere? What are we learning in terms of the impact on the terrorists themselves and, of course, their cells?
Yes, Ngozi, we did confirm that the attacks did happen. We did confirm that, yes, there were casualties from what we've heard from security sources. And like I said, well, it's an ongoing operation. And usually after such operations, well, you want to, there's always clearance operations that is going to be done by the military, that is going to go in. Ground troops are going to go in there. And then just like in cases like this that we haven't seen, maybe one or two unexploded devices, well, they detonate them. And of course, they move on with the operations. And I think the whole idea here is that whatever happened with the airstrikes from the United States is supposed to be a force multiplier. And so this is the point in which the troops have to move in. This is the point in which we have to take over whatever, ungoverned spaces there are that these guys have occupied. And so I think that's just the most reasonable and logical thing to do. While journalists and some other persons, civilians, will not have been able to gain access to this point because of the ongoing operations. Well, we want to believe that the Nigerian military are very, very professional, some of the best professionals in the world, and know exactly what to do after such, series of strikes.
And 48 hours after the strikes, you did mention the farmer that went to his farm only to discover, unexploded missiles there. But how confident are farmers and, of course, the communities to go about their regular life in those communities? What are you learning?
Yes, it's a worry. It's a worry. Well, while we were there, some of the places were cordoned off, and it's a vast expanse of land, and so the farmers couldn't gain access. Well, for some of them, they're already complaining. Now, let's not forget, we also showed you visuals of some crops, some farms that were affected where the initial explosion happened yesterday, or perhaps, tonight or very early yesterday morning. So we showed you those. We showed you, a whole lot of, ashes on the ground. Well, we show you that crater, and then, of course, that place has been cordoned. Now, that's an aspect of, that's one part. Kilometers, still in Jabo. You go there and then you still find unexploded, debris, missile, whatever it is. That is a whole lot to worry about. And so while we were there, we saw security operatives talking to the farmers, making them understand that it's just a little patience. There is need for the clearance operation that we talked about earlier, so that people can go in, sweep whatever there is, and then whoever finds any of these can do well to, of course, inform the authorities, inform the traditional ruler. We spoke with him earlier on, and he was the one who called the security guys to come in and, of course, do what they had to do when farmers were busy dragging, whatever it was out of the ground, having problems, some of them hitting it with iron metals. Anything could have happened. So, well, there's still a whole lot going on, and, part of it is the sensitization exercise that has to be done. Today, it is Sokoto. We do not know where it is going to be. Nice. We do not know if there's going to be such situations where you have to deal with residue or unexpended missile or whatever that is found on the ground, just so that we do not begin to have casualties from from smaller explosions. Anywhere that there is an explosion, you expect that, well, there could be an after effect. It could be an aftershock. It could be, some other of those smaller ornaments that are part of, that are usually part of these explosives that could still explode. And so you have to be very careful when such things happen.
Roha, thank you so much, our chief correspondent there. Apparently, a lot of public enlightenment has to go on in these communities to let the people know the dangers of being around those unexploded devices if they find any. Thank you very much. Stay on the story, Ferdinand.